Bang! Along with a world-shocking explosion, almost 100 profounders from the Southern Territory didn't even have the time to react before the ray of green light blasted them into mush. After the dust and dirt dispersed, a large, bottomless, and pitch-black hole had appeared outside ancient Domain City. As they gazed at that hole, countless profounders instantly gasped, and even the eyelids of Li Qingshui and Shi Luo had twitched. The attacks of the Heaven Entrance are truly too terrifying. Even the two of them were extremely fearful if they were to face this attack. In next to no time, the crowd recovered from their shock and gazed simultaneously towards the violet mink. At this moment, its eyes were a mix of crimson and violet while its expression was ferocious, and a violet aura was ceaselessly sweeping out from within it. The violet wings on its back were flapping swiftly and incessantly, and as they were ceaselessly flapped, some people with sharp and discerning gazes noticed that the space around the violet mink actually seemed to be rippling without end. Right at this moment, another ray of green light appeared within the Heaven Entrance. The expressions of all the spectators changed violently when they witnessed this scene, and then they didn't hesitate to flee towards the surroundings. Li Qingshui, Shi Luo, and Nangong Meng moved over 30 back as well. With their current strengths, they would naturally be able to resist an attack from the Heaven Entrance if they joined forces. However, that was truly unnecessary. Moreover, the violet mink had clearly gone berserk, so they didn't want to offend it. This time, the ray of green light didn't attack Yang Yi, and it shot explosively towards the violet mink instead. However, this strand of violet light hadn't even arrived in front of the violet mink when it vanished mysteriously. In the next moment, a world-shocking explosion resounded outside the Heaven Entrance, and some profounders who weren't able to flee in time were blasted into mush. Countless profounders were astounded when they witnessed this scene, and then they ran madly away from ancient Domain City. At this moment, they wished for nothing more than to have more legs because this violet mink was truly too terrifying. However, the matter was far from over. The Heaven Entrance seemed to have been infuriated, and it trembled violently. In the next moment, 5 rays of green light flashed into appearance and shot towards Yang Yi and the violet mink. Moreover, it was so swift that it was almost 2 times faster than the attacks from before. Even though Yang Yi couldn't move right now, he was still fully conscious, and he was instantly horrified when he saw those 5 rays of green light. How will the little fellow resist that? When he thought up to here, he disregarded his injuries and made the profound energy within his body surge violently before he forcefully circulated it out of his body. With a flip of his palm, the hidden sword appeared in his hand. He held it with both hands and forcefully endured the heartrending pain he suffered as he flashed forward and stood in front of the violet mink who'd been slightly stunned by the sight of those 5 rays of green light. After that, he let out a loud shout and swiftly slashed towards those 5 rays of green light. A strand of golden sword chi whistled sharply through the air as it shot forward like a bolt of lightning. However, the gold sword chi hadn't even come into contact with those 5 rays of green light when it was blasted into nothingness by the imposing aura emanated from those 5 green rays of light. Yang Yi laughed bitterly when he witnessed this scene. Could it be that I'm going to die here today? At the moment that he'd executed that strand of sword chi, his entire body had started to split apart slowly, and the bones and scarlet red flesh beneath his skin were exposed. He seemed extremely hideous and terrifying, and it caused the profounders in the surroundings to be unable to bear the sight of it. More and more blood flowed from him while his skin split wider and wider. Moreover, the profound energy within his body had started to rage about throughout his body. At this moment, Yang Yi felt that he was really about to die. If he hadn't entered here rashly, then perhaps he wouldn't die. But did he regret his actions? Yang Yi didn't. Even if he'd known what the outcome would be at the moment before he entered the Heaven Entrance, he would still do it without the slightest hesitation. He'd taken the little fellow to be a loved one of his, so how could he, Yang Yi, do nothing when the little fellow was in danger? Even if he was clearly aware that he wasn't a match for it, he still intended to act. Because wasn't the worst consequence just death? He was naturally not willing to die because he wanted to save his mother and take care of his younger sister. However, There were some things that he couldn't refrain from doing just because of these reasons. Just like this incident right now. Xianxia glanced at the violet mink with reluctance, and his lips parted slightly as he intended to tell the little fellow to flee quickly. However, at this moment, Xianxia was unable to open his mouth no matter how hard he tried, and then his consciousness gradually started to blur. As it watched Xianxia's eyes close slowly, the violet mink was stunned, and then it was infuriated. Roar! It howled furiously before a strand of dazzling violet light suddenly erupted from its body. When the spectators in the surroundings saw this violet light, they were instantly shocked to the point their eyeballs almost fell from their sockets, because everywhere it passed, it actually caused space to warp. Yes, space had started to warp. After those 5 rays of green light entered that warped expanse of space, they shockingly started to warp as well, and then it wasn't long before they vanished. Yes, they directly vanished just like that. As expected of the most mysterious and shocking spatial mink clan of the demon territory. When she witnessed this, Nan Gongmeng took a deep breath and said, "With such natural talent and terrifying spatial techniques, it's no wonder that even those extraordinary overlords of the demon territory don't dare to rashly offend them. But why would it be with a human? Moreover, it's a human who's only at the first rank of the king realm." Right at this moment, another wave of energy fluctuation arose from within the heaven entrance. After that, 10 rays of green light appeared out of thin air. The violet mink revealed sorrow in its eyes upon witnessed this scene. That spatial technique it executed just now was its final attack. In other words, it was unable to deal with these 10 rays of green light right now. Its figure flashed onto Xianxia's shoulder, and then it leaned its little head by the side of Xianxia's face. After that, it gradually closed its eyes. From the beginning until the end, it could have fled. Or it should be said that when it entered the heaven entrance, it was able to deal with the attacks of the heaven entrance, or if worse came to worse, it could still flee. Because no matter how swift the green light was, the green light wasn't as fast as it was. However, it hadn't expected that Xianxia would follow it in. After all, while the green light couldn't catch up to its speed, the green light was absolutely able to move faster than Xianxia. In other words, Xianxia was unable to flee. Moreover, Xianxia had been struck by the green light before it could even react. So how could it have abandoned Xianxia and fled by itself? Just like this very moment. Even though it was unable to resist those 10 rays of green light, it was still able to flee from them. However, it didn't choose to flee because it felt the same way as Xianxia did. Since they couldn't live together, then they would die together. Bastard. Son of a bitch. Asshole. Fucking bastard. Can't the two of you just stop? Ah. It has been 10,000 years. This princess is finally on the verge of breaking through a layer of the restrictions. But I have to fall once more into deep slumber because of the two of you. Ah! A tiny trash equipment spirit actually dares to spoil things for this princess. This princess will obliterate you. Ah! While he was unconscious, Xianxia had heard these words in his daze, and then Xianxia had the indistinct feeling that the tiny vortex within his body had suddenly started to circulate. The 10 rays of green light had arrived before Xianxia and the violet mink in the blink of an eye. However, in the next moment, a strand of violet energy suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia, and then the violet energy instantly blasted those 10 rays of green light into dispersion. After that, the violet energy didn't slow down at all as it directly blasted towards the heaven entrance at a speed that couldn't be noticed by the spectators. Bang! The wall of the heaven entrance that was over 300 m tall instantly trembled. In the next moment, 2 miserable and shrill cries resounded from within the heaven entrance, and then the heaven entrance rumbled as it collapsed under the astounded gazes of the spectators. No, it should be said that it had been transformed into powder and not just collapsed. Yes, the heaven entrance had been transformed into powder that was like fine sand. It wasn't just the heaven entrance, even the earth entrance suffered the same fate. The heaven entrance and earth entrance of ancient domain city are gone just like that. As they gazed at the powder and debris that covered the ground, all the spectators were dumbstruck, and they were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of ancient domain city. The middle-aged man was around 40 years old. His brows were thick, his eyes were large, and he had an oblong face and spirited eyes. Even though he hadn't said anything as he stood there, he emanated a terrifying and imposing aura. The expressions of the spirit realm experts instantly changed when they saw this middle-aged man, and then the two of them hurriedly ran over to the middle-aged man and bowed respectfully. After that, the spirit realm expert on the right said, "Elder Ma, what are you doing here?" The middle-aged man called Elder Ma shook his head lightly, and then he swept the surroundings with his gaze. His expression instantly turned solemn when he saw the heaven entrance and earth entrance. Perhaps others were unaware, but he was clearly aware that the heaven entrance and earth entrance was a Tao artifact, and the artifact spirit of this Tao artifact was comparable to an Exalt Realm expert. However, this artifact spirit that was comparable to an Exalt Realm expert had actually been obliterated by someone. Moreover, even the Tao artifact itself had been transformed into powder. Exactly how terrifying would one's strength need to be in order to accomplish this? It would at least require an expert at the 5th rank of the Monarch realm to accomplish it so thoroughly. When he thought up to here, Elder Ma took a deep breath before he said in a low voice, "I'm the Elder of Ancient Domain City's enforcement team, Ma Yipping. Friend, since you dared to destroy the heaven entrance and earth entrance, there should be no reason why you wouldn't come out and meet me, right?" No one answered him. Ma Yipping frowned, and then his divine sense surged out. After a short while, the brows on his forehead had knit together even more tightly, because with the strength he possessed, his divine sense could instantly cover an area of over 500 kilometers. He hadn't searched with his divine sense before this out of consideration for the person's strength, because acting in that way was extremely disrespectful. However, that person didn't answer him or make an appearance, and this made him slightly angry. So, he utilized his divine sense to search for the person. But he was puzzled by the fact that his divine sense hadn't found anything. There could only be a single reason why such a situation appeared, and it was that the person's strength far exceeded his own and had avoided his detection. However, in ancient domain city, no, throughout the profounder continent, the number of people who surpassed him in strength could be counted with one's hands. Moreover, all of these people were extraordinary seniors who had lived for a few 10,000 years. Ma Yipping was just about to speak, but right at this moment, his expression suddenly changed, and he gazed towards the north. After a short while, he said in a low voice, "Those fellows from the Devil territory are quite earlier this time." After pondering deeply for a moment, Ma Yipping glanced at the crowd in the surroundings, and then he said in a low voice, "Quickly enter the city if you don't want to die." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and vanished on the spot. He couldn't interfere in the battles between these juniors, and the reminder he just issued was already against the rules. Fortunately, it wasn't a severe violation. There was a mountain 500 kilometers away from ancient domain city, and the mountain towered into the clouds. When looked at from afar, the mountain seemed like a pillar that supported the heavens and the earth. It was exactly Heaven Tower Mountain that was renowned throughout profounder continent. It was also the barrier between the Devil territory and the Southern territory. If it wasn't for this mountain, then the Southern territory wouldn't belong to humans anymore. Of course, the true barrier to the young men of the Devil territory wasn't the mountain, and it was the restriction set up on the mountain. There was a mysterious and formidable restriction on this mountain. The restriction was a type of force that caused one to endure a greater gravitational force the greater one's cultivation was. For example, if experts at the first heaven realm ascended this mountain, then they had to endure 10 times the ordinary strength of gravity. But if it were king realm experts instead, then they would endure 30 times the normal strength of gravity. Moreover, the greater their cultivations, the stronger the force of gravity would be. However, if the youths of the Devil race were able to endure the gravity on Heaven Tower Mountain, surmount it, and arrive at the Southern Territory, then they would obtain extraordinarily great benefits. Because after they endured the gravity, which was multiples times stronger than normal, no matter if it was their own strength or mental state, it would obtain great improvement because of this. The Devil race was a race that respected the strong. Strength was equivalent to life to the youths of the devil race. So long as they could become stronger, then they could give everything up, including their lives. So, countless youths of the devil race would try successively to climb over Heaven Tower Mountain every single time that the fight for karmic luck at the Hidden Dragon Pagoda was held. However, only a pitiable few were actually able to climb over Heaven Tower Mountain. At this moment, a few hundred youths with tall and robust figures were walking step by step from the mountainside of Heaven Tower Mountain towards its peak. The appearance of these youths was extremely similar to humans, and if it wasn't for their figures that were clearly much more robust than humans and the pair of horns that grew out of their heads, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they were human. There was an especially striking young man at the front of this group of youths. Why was he said to be especially striking? Because the horns on the heads of all the other youths were black, yet his horns were violet. Moreover, when the youths behind him gazed at him occasionally, all their gazes were filled with extreme respect. Right at this moment, one of the youths walked over to the side of the violet-horned youth and said, "Moku, rest a little or don't obstruct the gravity for us." "Yeah, big brother Moku, if you hadn't been helping to relieve us of the gravity we suffered, then you would have climbed over Heaven Tower Mountain a long time ago. Just forget about us, otherwise, we'll truly become sinners of the entire devil race if we drag you down with us. Just forget about us. Big brother, go on ahead." The young man called Emoku stopped, and then he turned around to glance at them. As he gazed at their completely red eyes, Emoku took a deep breath and said, "How many came to climb over Heaven Tower Mountain with us this time?" Their expressions instantly dimmed down when they heard this, and they remained silent for a moment before someone answered. 1,300 brothers. "What about now?" asked Emoku once more. All of them lowered their heads and fell silent. "There are only 432 now." Emoku's eyes narrowed slightly as he said, 1,300 elites of my devil race left with me. Yet only 432 remain, while we haven't even arrived at Hidden Dragon Pagoda. If even all of you die on Heaven Tower Mountain, then it would be utterly meaningless even if I, Emoku, obtain the first on the Hidden Dragon list and seize countless amounts of karmic luck for the devil race. Your ability to arrive here is sufficient proof of the potential all of you possess. So long as all of you survive, then countless extraordinary experts would surge into appearance from my devil race in the future. However, if all of you perish, then there'll be a gap in the cultivation of experts within our devil race for a certain period of time in the future. At that time, our devil race would be in danger. We understand all of that. The youth by Emoku's side said. However, Heaven Tower Mountain is truly too terrifying. The gravity we're enduring now is already 46 times that of what we usually endure. If you weren't enduring most of the gravity for us, then we would have already been unable to hold on before this 46 times of gravity. But now, we've only arrived at the mountainside of Heaven Tower Mountain. Emoku took a deep breath, and then he suddenly turned around to gaze at the mountain, and a wisp of a savage expression flashed in his eyes as he gazed at this mountain that shot into the clouds. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand, pointed a finger towards the peak of the mountain, and shouted furiously, "What? Why must my devil race live in such an adverse environment? Why isn't my devil race allowed to enter the world of the humans? Why?" The youths behind Emoku fell silent. They naturally understood who Emoku was asking these questions to, and it was naturally the extraordinary expert who'd set up these terrifying restrictions all those years ago. The devil territory was covered in snow and ice all year round, and the weather there was extremely adverse. Because of that, most things were unable to survive there, and it caused the devil territory to have a severe lack of food. It could be said that amongst 10 infants in the devil territory, there were at least 4 that would be unable to grow up, because practically all 4 of them would die of starvation. It was exactly because of this that the youths of the devil territory had an extremely high regard towards martial strength. After all, if they possessed strength, then they wouldn't have to starve to death. Under such circumstances, the youths of the devil territory would naturally do all they could to become stronger. If the human profounders wanted to become experts for all sorts of various desires and reasons, then the devils of the devil race wanted to become experts purely for the sake of survival. This was also the reason why the strength of the devil race far surpassed the human race. On the other hand, the one that made the devil race suffer such hardships for thousands of years was naturally the extraordinary expert who set up the restrictions on Heaven Tower Mountain. The youths of the devil race naturally hated this human expert, but they couldn't do anything about it even if they hated him, because that extraordinary expert seemed to have left this world already. Of course, even if he was still in this world, they would be helpless against him. Just a restriction that the extraordinary expert had created thousands of years ago had trapped their devil race until now. The devil race hadn't produced such an expert for the last 10,000 years. The wind here grew stronger and stronger, and it was to the extent that these youths from the devil race were on the verge of being unable to endure it even with the formidable physical bodies they possessed. After a short moment of silence, Emoku took a deep breath, and then he pointed his finger towards the sky and said, "I, Emoku, swear on my soul that I'll definitely eliminate Heaven Tower Mountain from this world. I'll allow my devil race to stop enduring the hardships of the devil territory." As soon as he finished speaking, Emoku turned to gaze at the youths behind him and said, "The human world is right before our eyes. We just have to climb over this mountain, and we'll be able to taste the flesh and blood of humans. Don't all of you want to take revenge for this 10,000-year-old enmity with your own two hands? Yes, drink their blood and eat their flesh. Eat their flesh. Come follow Big Brother. Even if we die, we must eat the flesh of humans." 6 hours later, bang! Emoku's legs swiftly descended to the ground, and the ground beneath his feet instantly started trembling violently. After that, countless cracks that were thick as an arm swept swiftly towards the surroundings. In less than 2 breaths of time, the ground in an area of over 3 kilometers around Emoku had cracked open. Something worthy of mentioning was that there were less than 200 people behind Emoku now. As he gazed at the black, that was ancient domain city in the distance, Emoku revealed a savage smile as he said, "Humans! I, Emoku, am coming." As soon as he finished speaking, Emoku led the youths from the devil race in a dash towards ancient domain city. At the same time, on a plain that was over 1,000 kilometers away to the east, a pitch-black vortex had appeared out of thin air. The sky had suddenly dimmed when this pitch-black vortex appeared above the plain, and at the same time, a huge expanse of the ground around the pitch-black vortex had transformed into barren ground. After a moment of silence, countless black figures that wore black robes and seemed like shadows had floated out from within the vortex, and in next to no time, a few hundred black figures had appeared here. These black figures were extremely strange because they were floating in midair, and they didn't have shadows. Right at this moment, a black figure in the lead that held iron chains in his hand sniffed for a moment before he greedily inhaled a deep breath and said, "The smell of human souls. Hee hee. How I yearn for it." As soon as he finished speaking, this group of black figures floated swiftly towards ancient domain city. After Ma Yiping had just vanished outside ancient domain city, and while the crowd was still puzzled, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared above them, and this pressure caused countless profounders to instantly lay down on the ground. They were astounded. Right at this moment, over 10 enormous green dragons that were around 3 kilometers long had appeared in the sky above the area outside ancient domain city. These enormous dragons moved ceaselessly through the air while dragon pressure rained down incessantly, causing countless human profounders below to be horrified. "It's the Green Dragon clan of the Demon Territory." Shi Luo spoke with a solemn expression when he saw those dragons. "They're too arrogant," said Li Qingshui, who stood by Shi Luo's side. At the same time, the demonic dimension ball that floated in front of him had started to revolve swiftly. Meanwhile, Nangong Meng shook her head and said, "Let's retreat to the city first. Those fellows from the Devil Territory and Nether Territory have arrived as well." Li Qingshui and Shi Luo instantly frowned when they heard this. If it was just these green dragons from the Demon Territory, then the 3 of them naturally didn't have to retreat. But if those freaks from the Devil Territory and the bizarre fellows from the Nether Territory were to be included, then the 3 of them had no choice but to be fearful, because if there were no humans present, then the fellows from these 3 territories might fight against each other. But if there were humans present, then they would definitely join forces to deal with the humans first. Couldn't be helped. For the last 10,000 years, the human race was famous amongst the other races of the entire continent for bullying others with numbers. When they sensed various unfamiliar auras approaching from the surroundings, Li Qingshui and Shi Luo stopped hesitating. Shi Luo swept the profounders behind him with his gaze, and then he shouted in a low voice, "Swiftly return to the city if you don't want to die. Hurry!" As soon as he finished speaking, Shi Luo leaped up into the sky, and then he flipped his palm and a great axe appeared in his hand. As he held the great axe in his hand, a wisp of a ruthless expression flashed in Shi Luo's eyes. After that, he swiftly swung it towards the green dragons in the sky. After that, a ripple that was visible to the eye had instantly shot out, and the dragon pressure that suffused the sky was instantly dispersed when this ripple appeared. Meanwhile, the profounders in the surroundings had recovered from their shock, and then they didn't hesitate to run towards the city. In less than 15 minutes of time, only around 10 people still remained outside ancient domain city. Ants! The largest green dragon in the sky was instantly infuriated when Shi Long dispersed the dragon pressure with his great axe, and it swung its enormous tail towards Shi Luo. "Bring it on! Haha! I've wanted to slaughter a dragon for a long time." Shi Luo laughed brightly. He spun on the spot, and then he suddenly swung his axe downward. Earthbreaker! As soon as his voice finished resounding, a ray of light that was over 30 m long had shot forward like a dazzling shooting star towards the green dragon. Everywhere as passed, space trembled and shook, and it seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The impetus of his attack was extremely shocking. Bang! It smashed onto the green dragon's tail. In an instant, a world-shaking bang resounded here, and then a terrifying wave of energy swept out from the point of collision. Shi Luo swung his axe lightly, and the wave of energy that assaulted him was instantly dispersed. Right when he was about to launch another attack, Nangong Meng's anxious voice suddenly sounded out from below. "Shi Luo, let's go. Those fellows from the Devil Territory and Nether Territory are here." Shi Luo frowned when he heard this, and then he hesitated for a moment before his figure flashed and descended to the ground. At the same time, he seemed to have thought of something, and he gazed towards Yang Yi and the violet mink who seemed like statues and said, "What about them?" Nangong Meng's brows knit together slightly as she pondered deeply for a moment, and then she shook her head and said, "We don't have the time. Let's go." As soon as she finished speaking, Nangong Meng and Li Qingshui's figures flashed towards the city. Shi Luo glanced at Yang Yi and the violet mink, and he fell silent for a moment before he sighed lightly. After that, his figure flashed towards ancient domain city as well. At this moment, only Yang Yi and the violet mink remained here. What state was Yang Yi in right now? He was naturally still alive. However, his consciousness had fallen completely into a deep slumber. As for the violet mink, perhaps it had exhausted itself too much because it was actually sleeping while holding Yang Ye's neck. If Yang Yi was still conscious right now, he would notice that the army of dark beasts within his vortex dantian had actually fallen unconscious right now. Of course, most importantly, a little girl was floating in the air above the pool of golden profound energy within his vortex dantian. The little girl was very cute, or she should be said to be very beautiful, and she possessed an exquisite and flawless little face. Even though she was slightly young, anyone could imagine how gorgeous she would be once she grew up. She wore a white princess dress, and the dress was embroidered with numerous strange and mysterious talisman markings. These talisman markings seemed as if they were alive, and they were actually moving slowly. Moreover, a thumb-sized pearl hung down from her neck and resided on her chest, and it was bright, shiny, and dazzling. At this moment, she had her hands on her waist and a furious expression on her face, and it seemed like flames were about to spray from her eyes. At a certain moment in time, the little girl suddenly stomped her foot in midair, and then she said furiously, "He's truly too weak. Ah, why did you choose such a weak fellow? This princess can stab him to death with a single finger. Not only is he weak, he likes to cause trouble everywhere. It's fine if you die, but don't make this princess die with you. Ah!" In the tiny vortex, the little girl grew angrier the more she cursed. In the end, she'd even started stamping her feet with rage. However, her countenance was turning paler, and her figure was turning more and more ethereal. After a short while, the little girl seemed to have noticed the state of her body, and she hurriedly stopped cursing. She patted her chest forcefully, and then let out a long breath of air. A moment later, she raised her hands in front of her, and then suddenly clenched them and shouted, "Open!" As soon as she spoke, a door appeared mysterious above the pool of golden, profound energy. The space within the door was completely white and misty, and it was impossible to see anything. The little girl hesitated for a long time before she spoke with extreme reluctance. "Go!" Along with this word, a strand of violet energy suddenly surged out from within the door. When the violet energy appeared in the space within the tiny vortex, the figures of all the dark beasts that were lying on the ground had instantly shaken. After that, an extremely bizarre scene appeared. Those dark beasts suddenly grew much larger, and then a terrifying, imposing aura surged out from within them. The sky-howl demon wolf in Xianxia's tiny vortex had instantly become a spirit rank dark beast. Gray and Silver had stepped into the half-step spirit rank as well. On the other hand, the other dark beasts had instantly attained the peak of the king rank. This wasn't the end of it. The strand of violet energy shot out of the tiny vortex and arrived in Xianxia's normal dantian. After that, it started to circulate slowly in Xianxia's body. Everywhere the violet energy passed throughout Xianxia's body, his originally shattered meridians and veins instantly recovered. This wasn't just happening within his body, and even his body that had countless cracks on it had started to recover at a visible speed. However, the little girl's countenance grew paler and paler while her body grew more and more ethereal. At this moment, her figure even seemed translucent. Outside the city, it had only been 10 breaths of time since Nangong Meng's group of 3 entered the city when Moku had arrived while leading the 200 youths from the devil race with him. Moreover, Moku had just arrived outside the city when a group of black figures that seemed like shadows had suddenly appeared outside the city. Moku greedily inhaled a deep breath, and then he exclaimed, "What fresh air! What a magnificent city! There are no bone-piercingly cold snow and wind, no storms that rage throughout the year, and no adverse weather that makes the sky dim forever. This is really a paradise." Indeed, a black figure who held a chain in his hand spoke from amidst the group of black figures. "These humans are really blessed by nature." The black figure's voice sounded like a rock scratching a piece of iron, and it was sharp and ear-piercing. Moku glanced at the black figure, and then he said, "You're the #1 genius of the Nether Territory, Hanyu?" "Hee hee." The black figure laughed gloomily and said, "You're Moku, right? Hey. As expected of the strongest genius in the devil race, your soul is actually so strong. Hey." As he spoke, he licked his lips while his eyes revealed a greedy glow. Moku was just about to say something when his pupils suddenly constricted, because a pitch-black chain had suddenly appeared in front of him, and it was like a poisonous snake that shot towards his throat. Moku's face instantly fell. However, surprisingly, he actually didn't evade and allowed the chain to strike his neck. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of metal colliding resounded when the chain struck his neck. Han Yu's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene, and then he gestured pulled on the robe to make it return instantly to him. After that, he said with a solemn expression, "According to rumor, you've cultivated the heavenly devil physique to the 7th level. It seems like it isn't a rumor but a fact." The expressions of the black figures behind Han Yu had changed simultaneously when they heard him. The heavenly devil physique was created by the most outstanding devil exalt in the devil race from over 15,000 years ago. It was a body refinement technique that had 12 levels. According to rumor, if someone was able to cultivate it to the 10th level, then one could become a god by way of the body. If it was cultivated to the 11th level, then the body would be eternal and difficult to be destroyed. As for the 12th level, no one knew what the 12th level did, because for the last 15,000 years only that devil exalt was able to cultivate it to the 12th level, and that same devil exalt had vanished from the continent over 10,000 years ago. In short, the heavenly devil physique was said to be the #1 body refinement technique on Profounder continent. Of course, it was extremely difficult to cultivate as well, and it was to the extent that no one had been able to cultivate it to the 10th level after that devil exalt. Now, Emoku had actually cultivated it to the 7th level. In other words, Emoku's physical strength and defense was on par and might even surpass the dragon race. "You're not bad yourself," Emoku spoke in a cold voice. "You actually cultivated the soul snatcher technique to the point it's untraceable. If you used a little more strength just now, then my soul would have probably left my body." "Hey!" Hanyu laughed gloomily once more, and then he said, "You're worthy of forming an alliance with me, Hanyu." "An alliance?" Right at this moment, a disdainful voice suddenly resounded from the sky. In the next moment, the body of the largest dragon shook, and then it transformed into a ray of green light that shot towards the ground. When it arrived at the ground, the green light had transformed into a robust young man. The young man glanced at Emoku and Hanyu with undisguised disdain in his eyes, and he said, "Both of you actually intend to form an alliance to deal with a group of human ants. How laughable. It's laughable to the extreme. Human ants." Emoku chuckled, and then he glanced at the young man and said, "You're from one of the 4 great divine beast clans of the demon territory, the Green Dragon clan, right?" The young man said in a cold voice, "At least you have some discerning ability." Emoku shook his head and said, "You say the humans are ants? Why do I remember that the members of the Green Dragon clan who come to participate in the battle for karmic luck at the Hidden Dragon Pagoda 10,000 years ago were completely slaughtered by the founding ancestor of the Sword Sect, the Unfettered One? At that time, your Green Dragon clan didn't even dare to say a word in front of these humans. Right? What did you say?" The young man's expression instantly turned ferocious, and then a strand of dragon pressure assaulted Emoku. Emoku laughed with disdain, and then his lips parted slightly before he suddenly roared at the young man. A black ripple instantly swept out and completely dispersed the dragon pressure. The young man's expression changed slightly. Right when he was about to attack again, a pitch-black chain had suddenly appeared in front of him and stopped him from attacking. The young man turned to look at Hanyu, and then Hanyu said, "Emoku is right. We really shouldn't underestimate the humans. Most of the humans are weaklings indeed, but don't forget that their strongest experts have never been fewer in number to the total possessed by our 3 territories. Moreover, most importantly, the numbers that the humans possess far exceeds anything that our 3 territories can compare to. Just like this very moment, there are less than 500 of us when the members of our 3 territories are added together, but there are a few 10,000 humans. If we don't form an alliance, then even if 10 more or 100 more green dragons come from your clan, they'll still be unable to escape the fate of being slaughtered. Buy them." The young man grunted coldly and said, "Didn't you notice that those ants ran faster than rabbits when we arrived? Ants are always ants. They're the lowliest beings." "Huh." Suddenly, he looked at Yang Yi, who was below the entrance to Ancient Domain City, and then he revealed a savage smile as he said, "There's actually an ant that isn't afraid of death." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and instantly arrived before Yang Yi. After that, he smashed his fist toward Yang Yi's head. Previous chapter. A lowly being actually dares to try and spoil things for this princess? Oh, I'll destroy you. When she saw the young man from the Green Dragon race slam his fist towards Yang Yi's head, the little girl within Yang Yi's vortex dantian immediately stamped her feet with rage. She'd gone through great difficulties and paid a huge price to bring Yang Yi back from the brink of death. Yet now, this green dragon actually intended to send Yang Yi back there. How could she not be furious? However, she was already extremely weak right now. Fortunately, she still had the strength to deal with a lowly being. The little girl flicked her finger, and a strand of fine violet light instantly struck the green dragon's enormous fist. In the next moment, and under the astounded gazes of all the spectators, the green dragon was blasted flying, and he flew almost 3 kilometers afar before he smashed heavily to the ground. His fate was unknown. Moku and Hun Yu's pupils had constricted violently at the same time, and their gazes towards Yang Yi had become extremely solemn. Even though that green dragon was arrogant and proud, there was no need to doubt its strength. At the very least, the two of them didn't dare say that they could definitely defeat that green dragon. However, he'd been strangely blasted flying at this moment. Most importantly, both of them had been unable to notice how that green dragon was blasted flying. It was an Exalt Realm expert or even a Monarch Realm expert. At this moment, both Moku and Hun Yu had similar thoughts. But in next to no time, they felt puzzled because the various territories had an agreement that experts at the Exalt Realm and above couldn't attack them at the ancient battlefield. Yet now, a human expert had attacked them. In other words, the humans had violated the agreement. So, logically speaking, the experts of the Devil Race Demon Territory and Nether Territory within the ancient battlefield should have taken action to stop this. But why was there no movement at all? A white-haired old man stood in the clouds above ancient Domain City, and a middle-aged man in gray robes was standing in front of him. The middle-aged man was an expert from the Devil Race because he had a pair of horns on his head. The white-haired old man's eyes narrowed. After a short while, he opened his eyes while a wisp of bewilderment flashed in them. After that, he shook his head and said in a low voice, "How strange! I'm actually unable to detect the aura of the person who launched that attack. Could it be her? Impossible. She wouldn't make an appearance even if Profounder Continent vanishes. But if it wasn't her, then who was it? Qian Huan, even you are unable to detect that person's aura?" Meanwhile, the middle-aged man from the Devil Race spoke in a low voice. The old man called Qian Huan shook his head, and then he said, "Mo Xian, the spiritual energy and soul energy of your Devil Race is much stronger than my human race. Even you can't detect it." The middle-aged man called Mo Xian glanced deeply at Qian Huan, and then he didn't speak further. Qian Huan was stunned, and then he said with an astounded tone, "You suspect that we humans violated the agreement on purpose?" "I didn't say anything like that," Mo Xian said coldly. "It was you who said that." Qian Huan was instantly infuriated. Right when he was about to speak, Mo Xian said, "But it doesn't matter. In any case, that person didn't make a move against a genius from my Devil Race. Moreover, that person didn't strike a lethal attack against that stupid dragon. Obviously, that person merely intended to teach that fellow a lesson. Right, what exactly is the background of that human kid? He's actually able to make a spatial mink follow by his side." When he spoke up to hear, Mo Xian paused for a moment before he said, "Qian Huan, that kid wouldn't be some sort of trump card that you humans prepared in order to deal with my Devil Race, right? If I said he is, would your Devil Race be afraid?" said Qian Huan in a flat tone. Mo Xian was stunned, and then he roared with laughter and said, "Qian Huan, just because of what you just said, I, Mo Xian, will absolutely not eat your flesh if you lose to me in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, Mo Xian's figure flashed and vanished on the spot. After Mo Xian left, Qian Huan glanced at Yang Yi and frowned, and he seemed to be thinking of something. Let's take a look at the tiny vortex within Yang Ye's body now. At this moment, the little girl's body had become completely translucent, and it would probably be impossible to notice her even if someone was here right now. The little girl gazed ahead with reluctance. To be more precise, she was looking at the outside world. Suddenly, she roared furiously and hysterically. "Yang Yi, you idiot, you stupid idiot! How could you be so weak? How could you be so damn weak? Quickly cultivate. Cultivate. Do you know what it's like to be locked up for thousands of years? Ah! You even got the primordial violet energy that this princess refined for a few thousand years. Hurry up and get stronger. Ah! Once this princess gets out of here, this princess will destroy this world." "Ah!" The little girl's voice gradually weakened. In the end, she transformed into a strand of white light that entered the door from before, and then the door suddenly vanished on the spot. After that, the tiny vortex returned to calm. It seemed as if the little girl and the door had never appeared here. Outside ancient Domain City, hundreds of gazes were staring fixedly at Yang Yi, and it seemed like they wanted to see through him. Right at this moment, the green dragon that the little girl blasted flying just now started crawling up slowly from the ground. However, at this moment, he wasn't prideful and arrogant anymore, and the only emotion he had was deep fear and terror. Earlier, he'd sensed the aura of death for the very first time. Even he didn't know what had blasted him flying, but he was able to sense how terrifying the energy that blasted him flying was. It was an energy that made even his soul tremble. A strange scene appeared here. A few hundred people were staring fixedly at Yang Yi, and they didn't say anything, causing the surroundings to be silent to the point of being slightly terrifying and shocking. Let's talk about Yang Ye's current state now. Under the healing effects of the violet energy, the injuries inside and outside his body had been completely healed. Yang Yi opened his eyes slowly, and then 2 strands of violet light flashed in his eyes. As he sensed the state his body was in, Yang Ye's face instantly froze because he noticed that he was actually at the 5th rank of the King Realm right now. Yes, it was the 5th rank of the King Realm. Moreover, he even sensed that his physical body seemed to have grown stronger as well. What's going on? Yang Ye's mind was filled with questions. Such an instant improvement of 5 ranks is extremely unusual. This improvement didn't pleasantly surprise Yang Yi, and it caused him to feel slightly worried instead, because his cultivation had been improving a bit too swiftly, and it seemed like the chains between ranks of cultivation were useless against him. In next to no time, Yang Yi thought of the tiny vortex, and he investigated it. Yang Yi was instantly stunned once more when he saw those dark beasts within it. The spirit rank. Yang Yi gulped a huge mouthful of saliva when he saw the sky-howl devil wolf that was lying on the ground, and then he said, "The half-step spirit rank, the peak of the king rank. What the fuck happened?" Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something, and he swiftly turned to look at the little fellow. When he saw the little fellow snoring loudly as it slept, Yang Yi immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, the little fellow is fine. When he recalled what the little fellow had done for him just now and the little fellow's refusal to leave him until the end, Yang Yi was quite touched. Even though the little fellow hadn't spoken a single word throughout the time that they'd been together, Yang Yi knew that the little fellow had taken him to be a loved one. Even though he was a human and the little fellow was a demon beast, the enmity between the human race and the demon beasts was unable to affect their relationship. It could be said that no matter if it was human or demon beast, Yang Yi and the little fellow wouldn't show mercy to any that tried to harm them. Yang Yi stretched out his hand to embrace the violet mink, and an indescribable feeling of pain arose in his heart when he gazed at the violet mink whose face was covered by an exhausted expression. He rubbed the violet mink's head lightly, and then he placed the violet mink in the pool of golden profound energy within the tiny vortex. As soon as it entered the pool of profound energy, the violet mink's expression eased up, and then strands of violet light flickered into appearance. Yang Yi instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this scene. Fortunately, the tiny vortex is effective towards the little fellow's injuries. Otherwise, I would really not know what to do. Yang Yi took a deep glance at the tiny vortex, and then his expression turned solemn because he noticed that the tiny vortex seemed to be slightly heaven-defying. However, the tiny vortex had always been too mysterious, and he'd never been able to find out anything about it. Fortunately, the tiny vortex seemed to carry no ill intent towards him. Conversely, it would even lend a hand when he was in extreme danger. Moreover, he obtained enormous benefits every single time it helped him. Just like this time, he'd directly jumped to the 5th rank of the King Realm. Yang Yi stopped thinking about all of this. He shook his head, and then he was instantly stunned when he raised his head to look forward, because there were a few hundred people staring fixedly at him right now. Yang Ye's expression changed slightly when he noticed their dressing and appearances. He knew that these fellows were probably the monstrous geniuses of the Devil Territory, Nether Territory, and the Demon Territory. Yang Yi glanced at his surroundings, and he instantly laughed with ridicule when he saw that there wasn't a single human here. He didn't blame those profounders for abandoning him. After all, it was fine so long as they didn't kill him. How could he, Yang Yi, wishfully hope that these so-called beings of the same race as him would lend him a hand? Yang Yi shook his head and stopped thinking about all of this. Moreover, He paid no attention to those hundreds of people that were staring at him. He turned around and walked towards ancient domain city. Right at this moment, Xianxia suddenly said, "Wait!" Xianxia stopped, and then he turned around to gaze at Xianxia before he said indifferently, "What?" As he spoke, the profound energy within his body started to surge. "You seem to have been abandoned by your own race," said Xianxia. "It can't be considered as abandonment. I'm already very surprised and grateful that they didn't seize the opportunity to kill me," said Xianxia in a flat tone. Xianxia's brows raised, and then he said, "My brothers behind me haven't eaten anything for many days. Your strength isn't bad, so your flesh should be not bad as well. How about you allow my brothers to have a taste of flesh?" Meanwhile, Yu suddenly stated, "His soul is mine. Eat my flesh? Devour my soul?" Xianxia chuckled, and then he shrugged and said, "Bring it on." The members from the Devil Territory, Demon Territory, and Nether Territory were in confrontation with Xianxia below the city walls, whereas a dense expanse of human profounders stood on the walls of ancient domain city. After they witnessed how terrifying the Green Dragon clan from the Demon Territory was, the gazes that these human profounders shot towards the members of the Nether Territory and Devil Territory were filled with fear. The total number of experts from these three territories didn't even amount to 1,000. However, it was precisely these less than 1,000 experts that made the tens of thousands of human profounders within ancient domain city to fear meeting them in battle. Actually, if these human profounders were to unite and work together, then the experts from those three territories would absolutely not be a match for the human profounders even if they had another 1,000 experts on their side. But the problem was, would these thousands of humans unite? They were from different territories and different sections. Most of them were even enemies with each other. So, was it even possible to make them band together to fight the experts from the Nether Territory, Devil Territory, and Demon Territory to the death? Of course, there was an even more important point. Most humans had a common characteristic, and it was their fear of death and selfishness. There were also some human profounders who weren't afraid of the Nether Territory, Devil Territory, and Demon Territory, and these profounders were Shi Luo, Li Qingshui, and Nangong Meng. Because with the strengths they possessed, they didn't have to be fearful even if they faced an ordinary Exalt Realm expert. However, they had no choice but to choose to retreat at this moment, because if they really went to battle with the experts from the other territories who were below the city walls, then 9 out of 10 of these fellows who were on the city walls would most probably just stay here and watch the battle. Most humans weren't just afraid of death and selfish, they were extremely greedy as well. Was backstabbing rare amongst humans at all? The 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory didn't refrain from fighting because they were afraid. It was because they had no other choice. Of course, it could be said to be an excuse as well. Below the city walls, Xianxia and Yu were stunned when they heard Xianxia, and then they roared with laughter. After laughing for a short moment, Xianxia sized Xianxia up from top to bottom before he said, "You want us to gang up on you? Human, do you think it's possible that we would do such a thing against you?" As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia's expression suddenly turned cold, and then he said to a youth of the devil race who stood behind him, "Xianxia, deal with him." The man called Xianxia revealed a savage smile when he heard this, and then he licked his lips and said, "The taste of flesh. Human, I haven't had meat for a very long time. Ha ha." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and shot explosively towards Xianxia. When he arrived less than 3 m away from Xianxia, Xianxia shouted loudly before he smashed his fist toward Xianxia's head. Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly drew his sword and slashed when Xianxia's fish had arrived around 10 inches in front of him. A strand of golden light flashed. In an instant, Xianxia's figure suddenly stiffened on the spot when his fist was merely less than 2 inches away from Xianxia. Hiss! After a moment of silence, Xianxia's body instantly split into 2, and a huge amount of blood surged out like a fountain, causing the scene to be bloody to the extreme. 4th level sword intent. The disdain on Xianxia and Yu's faces had vanished when they witnessed this scene, and it was replaced with a solemn expression instead. Even if a sword cultivator who possessed 4th level sword intent couldn't compare to them, such a profounder could absolutely not be considered to be a weakling. Or it could be said that they currently lacked the qualifications to disregard a sword cultivator who'd comprehended 4th-level sword intent. This is what an expert of the devil race is like? Xianxia sheathed his sword and shook his head. His eyes revealed undisguised disappointment as he said, "So an expert of the devil race is actually so weak. In any case, I'm all alone. So, why don't all of you come at me at once?" He was purely showing off when he spoke those last words. Even though he seemed to have slaughtered Mo with ease, he'd practically utilized his entire strength just now. 4th-level sword intent coupled with his golden profound energy and the strength of his physical body. Moreover, he was already at the 5th rank of the King Realm now while Mo had underestimated him. So, these were the reasons why he was able to instantly annihilate Mo with a single attack. In short, if those fellows in front of him were to join forces against him, then he would probably be instantly torn apart. This was exactly the reason why he'd provoked them like that. Hee. Meanwhile, a black figure behind Hunyu suddenly let out a wave of strange laughter. And then his figure floated mysteriously to arrive around 10 in front of Xianxia. He gazed at Xianxia and laughed gloomily once more before he said, "4th-level sword intent, and it's even so sharp. I presume your soul is extremely strong." Hee. As soon as he finished speaking, the black figure moved his wrist slightly, and a black-colored iron hook that was made of energy had suddenly flashed into appearance before it shot towards Xianxia. Xianxia's expression remained unchanged, and he tightened his grip on his sword before he slashed with it. However, his sword actually passed through the iron hook while the iron hook remained completely unharmed instead. Moreover, it didn't slow down at all as it directly hooked his neck. Xianxia's expression swiftly changed. However, to his surprise, he didn't feel any pain coming from his neck. Right when Xianxia was bewildered, his pupils suddenly constricted because he felt as if his soul was actually about to leave his body. This was the first time he'd encountered such a situation, and it caused Xianxia to be shocked in his heart. Xianxia didn't dare hold back at all, and he issued a command in his heart, causing the hidden sword to shoot out explosively. The black figure's expression had instantly changed when the hidden sword shot violently towards him because he'd sensed an incomprehensible feeling of danger. The black figure didn't hesitate at all to float backward and leave the spot he stood at just now. As soon as the black figure retreated, that feeling where his soul seemed as if it was about to leave his body had instantly vanished. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief before a wisp of ghastly killing intent flashed in his eyes. With a flip of his palm, the sword chest instantly appeared, and then he commanded the 36 Earth-rank swords within the sword chest to transform into 36 rays of light that shot swiftly like bolts of lightning towards the black figure. Under the enhancement of his 4th-level sword intent, the speed and might of the 36 swords had been instantly amplified by countless times. The black figure hadn't even been able to react before they shot through his body. After that, the black figure's body gradually dispersed in midair under the astounded gazes of countless profounders. After he killed the black figure, Xianxia issued a command in his heart, and the 36 swords instantly shot into the sky before they circled around above him. After that, he gazed at Mo and the others before he said, "Who else?" At this moment, Xianxia didn't try to show off anymore, and he was truly infuriated right now. In the beginning, he didn't have a hostile attitude towards the devil race, the nether territory, and the demon race because there was no enmity between them. So, he'd chosen to leave once he'd woken up. However, they refused to let him go because he was a human. "Since you don't intend to let me go, then let's fight. In any case, I'll summon the lightning eagle and flee if I can't defeat all of you." Xianxia wasn't a pedantic person at all. When they saw Xianxia kill that black figure from the nether territory, both Mo and Hunyu's had turned gloomy. They knew that they'd underestimated the strength possessed by this human, and it was exactly because of their underestimation that they'd lost 2 of their companions. Since they were able to come here, both Mo and that black figure could be said to possess extremely enormous potential and natural talent. If they were given sufficient time, then they would definitely become experts in the future. However, Mo Shi and that black figure didn't have futures anymore because Mo Ku and Hun Yu had underestimated the enemy. Mo Ku glanced at the 36 swords that circled around above Yang Yi, and then he pondered deeply for a moment before he slightly raised his right foot. Right at this moment, a youth from the devil race who stood on Mo Ku's left had stepped forward before Mo Ku could act, and then he glanced at Yang Yi before he said, "Big brother, it's only a sword cultivator who had comprehended 4th level sword intent. There's no need for you to make a move at all. I, Mo Chio, am sufficient." Mo Ku glanced at this youth, hesitated for a moment, and then nodded before he said, "All right." The youth nodded, and then he turned around to gaze at Yang Yi before he said, "My devil race respects the strong. You've used your strength to prove that you're not weak. So, you have the qualifications to obtain my respect. I'm Mo Chio, and I'm at the 8th rank of the King Realm. I don't want to bully the weak, so I'll let you strike me once without fighting back." Mo Chio's figure flashed as he spoke, and he arrived 10 away from Yang Yi. After that, he stretched out his hands to his sides as if Yang Yi could feel free to attack him. Hun Yu frowned when he heard the youth, and then he gazed at Mo Ku and reminded, "He seems to be courting death. Don't forget that he's a sword cultivator. Moreover, he's a sword cultivator who has comprehended 4th level sword intent." Mo Ku said indifferently, "Mo Chio has already cultivated the heavenly devil physique to the 4th level. Not to mention a tiny profounder at the 5th rank of the King Realm. Even ordinary spirit realm experts would find it difficult to injure him." Hun Yu didn't speak further when he heard this. Yang Yi was first stunned when he heard Mo Chio, and then he revealed a mysterious smile as he said, "Are you sure?" Mo Chio stated proudly, "Of course." Yang Yi nodded, and then he walked slowly towards Mo Chio. In next to no time, Yang Yi had arrived in front of Mo Chio. Mo Chio remained motionless while his face was covered in a calm expression and a faint wisp of disdain. Yang Yi flipped his palm, and a sword flew into his grasp. He grinned as he held the sword in his hand, and then he moved it slowly up to Mo Chio's chest. Right when he was about to exert force, he stopped once more and gazed at Mo Chio before he said, "Are you really going to let me strike you once?" Mo Chio said impatiently, "I said I would, so I would. What's with all the crap?" All right, I'll attack right away." Yang Yi nodded. In the next moment, Yang Yi's expression suddenly changed while a wisp of cold light flashed through his eyes. After that, a tiny thumb-sized strand of flames flowed along the sword and instantly came into contact with Mo Chio's body. As soon as it came into contact with Mo Chio's body, the strand of flames flashed in and out of Mo Chio before returning into Yang Yi's body. It was like it had never appeared. At the moment that this strand of flames had come into contact with Mo Chio's body, Mo Chio's eyes had instantly opened wide, and his eyes were filled with horror and regret. Yang Yi glanced at Mo Chio with pity before he withdrew his sword, and then he took around 10 steps back. In the next moment, Mo Chio's body had mysteriously burst into flames under the puzzled expressions of the countless spectators. After a single breath of time, Mo Chio had completely vanished on the spot. He didn't even leave a bit of ash behind, and it was like he'd never been there. When they witnessed this scene, the expressions of Hun Yu, Mo Ku, the Green Dragon, Shi Luo, Li Qingshui, Nangong Meng. Actually, it should be said that the expressions of everyone in the surroundings had changed when they witnessed this scene. Especially Mo Ku. The shock in his heart was greater than anyone else, because only he was clearly aware of how terrifying the heavenly devil physique was. It could be said that it was impossible for even a low-grade heaven-rank combat technique to kill Mo Chio, who'd attained the 4th level in the heavenly devil physique. Yet now, Mo Chio had died just like that. Moreover, it was done by a casual swing of the sword from a 5th-rank King Realm profounder. The strand of flame was naturally the Nether Ghost Flame. In the beginning, Yang Yi had never thought about utilizing the Nether Ghost Flame. After all, it was one of his greatest trump cards. Moreover, he'd always followed the principle of showing weakness to defeat a strong opponent. However, Mo Chio's words had made him change his mind. It was when Mo Chio said that experts should be respected. It was exactly these words that made Yang Yi stop holding back and instantly annihilate Mo. There were countless geniuses in ancient Domain City. Most of these geniuses were proud and conceited, but they respected the strong. Or it should be said that the entire profounder continent respected the strong. So, if he wanted to reduce the troubles he faced and receive the respect of others, then he had to reveal a formidable strength. Only in this way would the troubles he faced be reduced. Of course, most importantly, Yang Yi wanted to prove himself right now. After he witnessed the violet mink going berserk just now, he knew that the little fellow's background was absolutely terrifying. With the relationship between humans and demon beasts, it was utterly impossible for the little fellow's clansmen to allow them to be together. Separate them? That was naturally impossible. But if he didn't want to be separated from the little fellow, then Yang Yi had to prove himself. 10,000 years ago, the Sword Sect's founding ancestor was unparalleled throughout the world, and he made the experts from all the other territories submit and bow before him. At that time, could anyone control the fate of the Sword Sect's founding ancestor? Now, Yang Yi wanted to prove that he could become someone just like the Sword Sect's founding ancestor. No, it should be said as he wanted to prove that he could surpass the Sword Sect's founding ancestor instead. He couldn't keep a low profile forever. Now, Yang Yi intended to flaunt his strength. With a command in his heart, the 36 swords that circled in the sky had transformed into 36 rays of light that floated around Yang Yi. And then the profound energy within his body surged while his 4th-level sword intent shot out like tidewater. Yang Ye's brows raised as he gazed at Mo and the others, and then he said, "Who else?" When he spoke these words, a howl suddenly erupted from the 36 earth-rank swords that surrounded him, and then they started to spin swiftly. Moreover, the swords possessed by all the human profounders on the walls of ancient Domain City had forcefully struggled free of their owners' grasps and transformed into rays of light that circled in the air above Yang Yi. In less than a few breaths of time, over 10,000 swords were circling in the air above Yang Yi. How imposing was such a huge number of swords? It caused some of the profounders of the Devil Territory and Nether Territory to be unable to help but take a few steps back. At this moment, the imposing aura Yang Yi possessed while standing beneath these swords simply made it seem as if he could even pierce a hole through the sky. Yang Yi slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he'd entered into that strange and profound state again. The blood of the human profounders on the city wall instantly couldn't help but surge when they saw Yang Yi terrify the experts from the Devil and Nether territories. At this moment, no matter which territory and sect Yang Yi came from, he'd undoubtedly brought honor to the human race right now, and it even caused some profounders to start feeling ashamed. Ancient Domain City was the territory of the human race, so why did they have to retreat as soon as the profounders from the Devil Territory, Nether Territory, and Demon Territory arrived? Why? Moreover, their forces amounted to less than 1,000 profounders in total, whereas there were tens of thousands of humans on the wall of ancient Domain City. A few tens of thousands were afraid of 1,000? It was a humiliation. At this moment, countless human profounders felt extremely ashamed. Mo's expression turned slightly solemn as he gazed at Yang Ye's extremely sharp and fierce, imposing aura. He understood that he'd underestimated this sword cultivator since the beginning. It was exactly because of this that 2 geniuses from his devil race had perished, and at the same time that Mo felt furious from this, he felt deep regret as well. But he wouldn't underestimate Yang Yi anymore because Yang Yi had completely infuriated him now. Mo took a step forward while he slowly clenched his right hand into a fist. Obviously, he intended to fight Yang Yi himself. Ha ha! Right at this moment, roaring laughter suddenly resounded from above the city wall. Everyone looked over and saw a young man in green clothes jumping down from the city wall. After he descended to the ground, the young man glanced at Yang Yi, who had his eyes closed before he gazed at Mo, and then he grunted coldly and said, "I really can't continue watching this. Bastards from the Devil Territory, Nether Territory, and Demon Territory. Do all of you actually intend to adopt the fucking tactic of taking turns to fight him? Do all of you know no fucking shame? It's Xianxia. He's actually here. Nangong Meng frowned and spoke in a low voice when she saw the young man in green clothes. Shi Luo frowned as well, and then he said in a low voice, "What does that fellow intend to do?" It wasn't just Nangong Meng and Shi Luo who recognized the young man. Numerous other profounders who stood on the city walls had recognized him. Xianxia was an elite disciple of an 8th-rank sect, the Divine Sword Sect, in the Central Territory. His reputation was extremely great in the Central Territory as well, and it was merely inferior to the 3 outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory. Even though his reputation was inferior to them, his strength wasn't, because he'd comprehended 5th-level sword intent at an age of less than 20. In the history of the entire Central Territory, there had only been a few who were able to attain 5th-level sword intent before the age of 20. It was exactly because of this that he was called the first sword in the Central Territory. According to rumor, so long as he attained the enlightened sword heart, then the Sword Emperor of Profounder Continent would definitely be him. A wisp of disdain arose on the corners of Mo's mouth when he heard Xianxia, and then he raised his head to glance at the human profounders on the walls of ancient Domain City before he said, "Even if it was a tactic of taking turns to fight others, it would be you humans who did it, right? You have a few tens of thousands on your side, while our 3 territories merely have less than 1,000. Are you not ashamed to talk about that when it's 1,000 against around 30,000? The green-clothed young man was speechless when he heard this. He raised his head to glance at the crowd that was watching with indifference on the city wall, and then he smiled bitterly. Thousands of humans have actually been terrified by 1,000 to the point of being afraid to leave the city. What a shame. Xianxia shook his head, and then he gazed at Mo and said, "Cut the crap. If you want to kill him, then you have to first get through me." Oh! Mo's brows raised as he glanced at Yang Yi, and then he gazed at the Xianxia and said, "Both of you are from the same sect?" Xianxia replied, "No." Mo asked another question. "Are you relatives?" "No." The young man in green clothes said, "I know what you mean. I can frankly tell you that today is the first time we've met. It's even to the extent that I've been extremely annoyed by him before this, because he's actually called the Quasi-Sword Emperor. To think that my Divine Sword Sect is an 8th-rank sect that possesses countless geniuses in the Sword Dao, yet none dare to call themselves the Quasi-Sword Emperor. Yet he, a tiny profounder from the Southern Territory, actually dared to do that. This made me feel extremely annoyed. So I rushed quickly to ancient Domain City with the intention of teaching him a lesson. When he spoke up to hear, he glanced at Yang Yi and said, "However, I just happened to encounter all of you when I arrived here. To my surprise, thousands of human profounders actually didn't have the courage to fight at all when they faced all of you. What a terrible shame. Fortunately, not all humans are afraid of death, right? I'm talking about this fellow called Yang Yi. Even though I'm fucking annoyed because he called himself the Quasi-Sword Emperor, but needless to say, his display just now really made me, Xianxia, admire him. So, I've come down from the city wall." Mo glanced indifferently at the crowd on the city wall, and then he said, "Even though we're all enemies, the 2 of you are worthy of respect. So, I'll bury your corpses after I've killed the 2 of you. Ha ha." Xianxia roared with laughter, and then he said, "Then I'll thank you in advance. They say the devil race cultivates both the body and energy. I, Xianxia, would like to see how exactly it's done." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia didn't seem to have done anything. However, a strand of bright light flashed, and it vanished in just an instant. Everyone was puzzled and bewildered. Right at this moment, a strand of a faint blood-red mark had suddenly appeared on Mo's neck. Mo stretched out his hand to wipe his neck, and then he shook his head and said, "The speed of your sword is the fastest I've ever seen. Unfortunately, you've only comprehended 5th-level sword intent, and this 5th-level sword intent of yours is clearly not stable yet. Perhaps you would be a slight threat to me if you'd comprehended 6th-level sword intent, but 5th-level sword intent. Haha, what can you possibly do even if I allowed you to stab me 10 times? The smile on Xianxia's face vanished, and it was replaced by an extremely solemn expression. He hadn't held back at all when he executed that attack from before. and an attack enhanced by 5th level sword intent wasn't even able to break through Moka's skin. This fellow Moka's physical defenses are actually terrifying to such an extent. This was something that he'd never expected. It wasn't just Xianxia. The expressions of Nangong Meng, Li Qingxue, and Shi Luo who stood on the city wall had become extremely solemn as well. After all, even they didn't dare be careless at all when facing Xianxia's sword technique that was enhanced by 5th level sword intent and moved swiftly like a bolt of lightning. However, even 5th level sword intent wasn't able to break through Moka's defenses, and they felt that Moka's physical defense was something that even some peak spirit rank dark beasts were unable to compare to. In other words, Moka was already in an invincible position. Moreover, Moka might even possess other trump cards. "It's my turn now," Moka spoke indifferently, and then he suddenly stomped the ground with his right foot. In an instant the ground trembled violently, and then it instantly crumbled apart. After that, a fist-sized rock on the ground whistled sharply as it tore through the air and shot explosively towards Xianxia. Xianxia's expression changed. He didn't dare be careless at all, and he immediately moved his sword horizontally to block this attack. Clang! The sword in Xianxia's hand shattered into countless fine pieces, and the fist-sized rock didn't slow down at all as it shot towards Xianxia's chest. Xianxia's pupils constricted while he was astounded in his heart. Right when he was about to utilize his trump card, a palm had suddenly appeared in front of his chest, and it grabbed the rock that carried terrifying force with it. Xianxia turned his head to the side, and he saw that Yang Yi had suddenly appeared beside him. "Thank you." Yang Yi nodded slightly to Xianxia, and then he turned to gaze at Moka before he said, "However, I'll deal with my own problems." Yang Yi exerted slight strength with his palm, and the rock in his palm instantly transformed into a pile of stones. After that, he relaxed his grip, and the stones instantly rolled down the tip of his fingers and fell to the ground. Yang Yi patted his hands before he issued a command in his heart, and then the myriad of swords that were circling in the air had instantly transformed into rays of light that shot violently towards the group from the devil race. 5th level sword intent. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they witnessed this scene. After all, Yang Yi had merely utilized 4th level sword intent just now. Yet now it had become 5th level sword intent. So, had Yang Yi been holding back, or did he just attain sudden comprehension? No matter which it was, no one in the surroundings dared to underestimate Yang Yi now. Even some spirit realm experts didn't dare look down upon a sword cultivator who'd attained 5th level sword intent. On the walls of ancient domain city, the expressions of Nangong Meng, Li Qingxue, and Shi Luo had become solemn at this moment. 4th level sword intent could only cause some trouble for them, but it was unable to threaten them. However, 5th level sword intent was different. Moreover, Yang Yi even possessed that profound sword technique. In short, Nangong Meng and the others had started to take Yang Yi seriously at this moment. On the other hand, the expressions of Yan Wu from the Flower Palace and Jia Wuji from the Sword Sect had become unsightly instead. After less than a month of time, Yang Yi hadn't just advanced from the 1st heaven realm to the king realm. He'd even improved his sword intent from the 4th level to the 5th level. Such terrifying natural talent. If Yang Yi is given a little more time and coupled with enlightened sword heart that he possesses, could anyone in the Southern Territory be a match for him? If Yang Yi was allowed to continue his growth, then the Sword Sect and Flower Palace would have a terrifying and extraordinary expert as an enemy in the future. When they thought up to here, killing intent instantly surged within the hearts of Yan Wu and Jian Wuji. Of course, even if Yang Yi hadn't revealed such terrifying natural talent in both cultivating and the Sword Dao, they would still not let Yang Yi off, because the Sword Sect and Flower Palace had given them instructions, and Yang Yi wasn't allowed to live. Of course, if they knew that Yang Yi had already comprehended 6th level sword intent now, then they would probably not arouse any ill intent towards Yang Yi. Yes. At this moment, Yang Ye's sword intent had advanced from the 5th level to the 6th level. After his mental state changed just now, his sword intent had improved once more, and it attained the advanced stage of sword intent. It was exactly because of this breakthrough that he was able to make those thousands of swords approach him and follow his every command. Yang Yi had naturally not attacked Mo upon returning to his senses for the sake of bringing honor to the human race. In his opinion, no matter if it was the devil race or the human race, they were both the same. So long as they didn't offend him, then he wouldn't go looking for trouble. However, Mo wanted to kill him now, so he naturally intended to return tit for tat. Since they intended to kill him, he intended to kill to his heart's content. The myriad of swords below the walls of ancient domain city were enhanced by 5th-level sword intent, and it was an astounding scene that revealed a shocking impetus. Moreover, the terrifying sword intent contained within the swords was something that even the youths from the devil race who took pride in their physical defense couldn't help but fear. What a magnificent sight! Meanwhile, Mo spoke abruptly, and then he shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, it only looks imposing." As soon as he finished speaking, Mo took a light step forward, and then a wisp of a savage expression flashed in his eyes as he gazed at the swords that covered the sky. In the next moment, Mo opened his mouth slightly, and then he suddenly roared at the swords. Roar! A ripple that was visible to the eye surged towards the swords that covered the sky, and then it collided with the swords. In an instant, an invisible wave of energy instantly swept out towards the surroundings. The wave of energy was like a tidal wave, and wave after wave of it swept incessantly towards the surroundings. In the end, the waves collided with the walls of ancient domain city, and it caused the city to tremble violently. The crowd on the walls of ancient domain city was extremely shocked when they witnessed this scene. The might of Mo and Yang Ye's attacks were actually so terrifying. My God, are they spirit realm experts? After quite some time passed, the waves of energy dispersed while the glow of the swords that Yang Yi controlled had vanished as well. Pieces of swords were actually scattered throughout the ground. Yang Ye's heart shook as he gazed at the pieces. How terrifying was the speed and strength of those swords when they were enhanced by 5th-level sword intent. One could say without the slightest hesitation that even an ordinary spirit realm cultivator would be unable to withstand that attack before just now. However, Mo had directly blasted it apart, and he'd done it with such ease. Looks like I underestimated my opponent a little. Yang Yi took a deep breath. Right when he was about to say something, a pitch-black chain suddenly passed through space and shot swiftly like a bolt of lightning towards his neck. This sudden and unexpected event caused Yang Ye's pupils to constrict. Right when Yang Yi was about to dodge, the pitch-black chain had suddenly passed through space once more, and it instantly arrived before Yang Ye's neck and coiled around it. Yang Ye's expression changed, and then he flicked his sword upwards at an angle with the intention of flicking the chain away. Clang! The chain was completely unharmed. On the contrary, the earth-rank sword in his hand had chipped instead. Yang Ye's expression changed once more when he witnessed this scene. Hee. Hanyu, who held the other end of the chain, chuckled and said, "You want to slash my nether chain apart? What a joke. Human. Not to mention an earth-rank sword. It's impossible for even a heaven-rank sword to harm my nether chain at all. Because this nether chain of mine is a pseudo-Dao artifact. Now that you've been chained by my nether chain, you'll definitely die no matter what extraordinary ability you possess. Because it doesn't just chain your body but your soul as well. Don't believe me? Do you feel an indescribable feeling of suffocation?" Haha! Right at this moment, Mo suddenly said in a low voice, "Hanyu, this is a battle between me and him. So what?" Hanyu laughed coldly and said, "Don't forget that he killed someone from my nether territory. It looks to me like you want to devour his soul." Mo said in a low voice, "I presume the soul of a genius in the sword Dao that has attained 5th-level sword intent would be extremely strong and pure. It's undoubtedly extremely tempting to you, and I understand that. If it was before this or at any other time, then I wouldn't have any objections if you acted against him. But not now, because he's my opponent. But his fate is in my hands." Hanyu said coldly, "Mo, I know you're very strong, but I, Hanyu, am not afraid of you. If it wasn't because I didn't want those despicable humans to benefit from a battle between us, I would have taken your soul a long time ago. Those are my thoughts exactly. Emoka's eyes narrowed slightly as he said in a low voice, I really dislike all of you fellows from the Nether Territory as well. If both of you aren't worried about the members from your territories being completely annihilated, then go ahead and fight each other. Right at this moment, the green dragon, Inglong, who had kept quiet until now, spoke abruptly. My green dragon clan is naturally not afraid of these ants. If worst comes to worst, we can just return to the demon territory. In any case, karmic luck isn't very important to our dragon clan. However, it's different for the two of you. How would the two of you return and give an explanation to your kin if you're unable to obtain sufficient karmic luck? Emoku and Hun Yu instantly fell silent when they heard this. If their races were to fight in the ancient battlefield, then it would be the humans who would benefit from it in the end. Of course, most importantly, their races couldn't afford any losses. At the very least, there couldn't be any unnecessary losses. Meanwhile, Inglong suddenly said, Since the two of you are in conflict because of this ant who stands before us, then allow me, Inglong, to deal with this ant. As soon as he finished speaking, Inglong's figure flashed, and he instantly arrived before Yang Yi, who was chained by the nether chain. After that, his expression instantly turned savage, while he didn't hesitate to smash his fist towards Yang Ye's head. Earlier, he'd been terribly humiliated in public because of Yang Yi, and with the pride possessed by the Dragon Clan, how could he swallow this humiliation? The reason he hadn't attacked just now was that he was afraid of that mysterious expert who'd attacked him. However, now it would seem like that mysterious expert probably wouldn't be making another move, or that mysterious expert had been stopped by the experts of Ancient Domain City. Because Yang Ye's life was in Hun Yu's hands, but that mysterious expert hadn't made an appearance. It was exactly because of this that Inglong dared to attack Yang Yi. Yang Yi frowned when he saw Inglong's fist blasting towards him, because he was in a very bad state right now. Not only was he unable to move freely because he was chained by the nether chain, even the profound energy within his body couldn't be circulated. Most importantly, it was just as Hun Yu said, and he felt suffocated. It was a form of suffocation that came from the depths of the soul. Such a situation was something he'd never experienced in the past, so he was in an extremely bad state right now. At this moment, when the fist of that young man called Inglong smashed down towards him, Yang Yi didn't dare hold back anymore. Right when he was about to utilize the nether ghost flame, a figure had flashed before him, and then Xianxia appeared in front of him. Xianxia laughed coldly before he suddenly slashed with his sword, and he struck Inglong's fist. Bang! Inglong's formidable strength shook Xianxia to the point his entire arm was number while he moved around 10 m back. Whereas, Inglong had retreated by around 4 m. Xianxia laughed coldly as he gazed at Inglong, who was furious, and he said with disdain, So this is the Dragon Clan of the Demon Territory. Why did the Dragon Clan become so shameless? You actually even abandoned the pride of the Dragon Clan and intended to attack a human that can't even move? If you fought him on your own, then I would just fucking watch even if you chopped him up into pieces. But you took advantage of the situation he's in, and I really can't continue watching that. Right, let me tell you one more thing. I look down upon your Dragon Clan from now onward. Ant! Inglong instantly stamped his feet with rage, and then his figure flashed explosively towards Xianxia. Right at this moment, Hun Yu grunted coldly, and then the profound energy within his body surged. In an instant, Yang Ye's pupils constricted because he felt a cold energy assault his body. No, it should be said that it assaulted his soul. Right at this moment, Yen Wu and Jian Wuji, who stood on the city wall, exchanged glances, and then they nodded slightly to each other. In the next moment, both of them leaped off the city wall, and then they raised their speeds to their limits and shot explosively towards Yang Yi. The natural talent Yang Yi revealed could be said to have aroused terror in time. Based on the strength Yang Yi revealed earlier, they knew that Yang Yi, who possessed 5th level sword intent, wasn't someone the two of them could go against any longer. Not to mention that Yang Yi possessed the enlightened sword heart as well. In other words, this was their best opportunity to kill Yang Yi. Otherwise, perhaps it would be they who were killed. Both of them were extremely swift, and it was even a sudden attack. Coupled with the fact that Yang Yi was chained by the nether chain right now. Both of them had arrived in front of Yang Yi without being obstructed at all. Yang Ye's expression changed slightly when he saw the two of them attacking him. However, he couldn't do anything right now. Since the beginning, he was unable to struggle free from the chains around him. So, he could only allow them to attack him now. A strand of cold light and red light flashed. A sword and a sharp thorn-shaped dagger stabbed at Yang Ye's throat. Clang. Two clear and melodious clangs resounded. Jian Wuji and Yen Wu's expressions changed violently. Because as soon as their sword and dagger touched Yang Ye's skin, they noticed to their astonishment that it actually felt as if they'd stabbed hard adamant. And it shook their arms to the point that their arms felt numb. After being dazed for a moment, the two of them stopped hesitating, and they slashed and stabbed at Yang Ye's head once more. Clang, clang. The clear, pleasant, and melodious sound of metal colliding resounded again. Jian Wuji and Yen Wu's attack descended like raindrops onto Yang Ye's head and throat. However, to their astonishment, Yang Yi was completely unharmed. Emoka frowned when he witnessed this scene. Obviously, he hadn't expected that Yang Ye's physical defense would have actually attained such a level. On the other hand, the expressions of the three outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory who were standing on the city wall had turned solemn as well. Yang Ye's strength was already extremely formidable. Now even his physical defense was so terrifying. In other words, Yang Yi possessed the strength to threaten them. But fortunately, Yang Yi was a human in the end, and he wasn't from the devil race or nether territory. So long as he was a human, then even if they couldn't be friends, they could avoid becoming enemies. At this moment, both Jian Wuji and Yen Wu were horrified. Yes, they were truly horrified, because their full strengths were actually not even able to break through Yang Ye's skin. What did this mean? It meant that the gap between their strengths was like the gap between the heavens and the earth. Presently, the thought of killing Yang Yi was undoubtedly like wishful thinking to them. Are the two of you having fun? Yang Yi glanced at them and said, "Now it's my turn." With a command in his heart, the countless swords that had fallen to the ground earlier shot once more into the sky, and then they shot explosively towards Yen Wu and Jian Wuji. Both of them were horrified, and they hurriedly executed their movement techniques to their limits and dashed madly to the city. However, right at this moment, the swords suddenly changed directions, abandoned them, and shot violently at Hanyu instead. Jian Wuji and Yen Wu instantly heaved sighs of relief, and then they dashed madly into ancient domain city. On the other hand, Hanyu's expression changed slightly, because he hadn't imagined that Yang Yi, who was chained by the nether chain, was actually still able to control the swords. Hanyu didn't dare act carelessly when he saw those swords envelop down towards him, and he hesitated for a moment before he twisted his wrist. The nether chain instantly released Yang Yi and returned to him, and then his hand moved slightly, causing the nether chain to transform into shadows that covered the sky and collided head-on with the swords. Bang! A thunderous bang suddenly resounded in the sky above ancient domain city, and then waves of energy covered the heavens and the earth as they dispersed down with an extremely shocking impetus. After a moment passed, everything returned to calm once more. Yang Yi held an earth-rank sword in hand as he stood proudly on the spot, and a strand of violet and sharp sword intent ceaselessly swept out from his body. The sword intent struck the ground occasionally, and then numerous bottomless and pitch-black cuts were instantly struck open on the ground. At this moment, Yang Yi was slightly furious indeed, because he'd never thought about causing trouble, but these people just refused to let him go, and they attacked him successively. Do they really think I'm some sort of weakling they can just crush as they please? However, he didn't attack right now because he knew it was utterly impossible to kill Hanyu and Emoku without utilizing the Nether Ghost Flame and 6th level sword intent. Besides that, even if he utilized these trump cards, he wasn't confident in his ability to kill them, because up until this point in the battle between them, he was able to sense that they hadn't fought seriously at all. Moreover, they had a few hundred experts on their side. What about him? He only had the green-clothed young man by his side. Xianxia took a deep breath, turned around to gaze at the crowd atop the city wall, and then he pointed at Moku and the others as he shouted loudly. All of you should be clearly aware of the objective they came to Ancient Domain City with. All of you should be clearly aware of the hostility they hold towards the human race. All of you should be clearly aware of the strengths that they possess. Once you leave Ancient Domain City, most of you will absolutely die if you encounter them while you're alone. Now, so long as we work together and unite as one, then we can annihilate all of them right here and now. At that time, the ancient battlefield and hidden dragon pagoda will belong to us, humans. When he spoke up to hear, Xianxia pointed his sword at Moku and the others, and then he gazed at the crowd on the city walls and said, "Leave the city and annihilate them. Do all of you dare to do that?" Under the enhancement of his profound energy, Xianxia's voice rumbled like a bell, and it was deafening. However, what he got in return was deathly silence. Yes, the crowd on the city walls just gazed coldly and indifferently at him. None of them answered his call, and this included the three outstanding geniuses of the Central Territory. The three of them were slightly moved in the beginning, but they quickly abandoned their intentions. It wasn't because they were afraid, as they as well wanted to annihilate these fellows that didn't belong to the human race. However, the attitude of those profounders around them caused their thoughts to remain as thoughts. Even if the three of them joined Xianxia and Xianxia, they would absolutely be killed if they went up against Moku and the others. Just as Xianxia said, unless all the humans here worked together and united as well, it would be impossible to annihilate Moku and the others right now. But was it even possible to make all the humans unite? Under the circumstances that their own interests or lives weren't in danger, it was impossible for humans to unite. At the very least, it was impossible right now. Moku chuckled when he saw this, and then he gazed at Xianxia and said, "You're right. If they did join forces, then they really could annihilate all of us." However, when he spoke up to hear, he raised his head to gaze at the crowd on the city walls and said, "I can guarantee that half or even more of the humans here will die." The expressions of the crowd on the city walls had instantly changed when they heard Moku. A profounder on the city wall said, "Xianxia, this enmity is between you and then, yet you want to drag us down with you? How treacherous of you." "Exactly. You caused this trouble yourself, yet you want us to fight with our lives on the line. What an awesome plan. Do you think we're idiots? Do you think we would fall for that? Haha. Xianxia, didn't the rumors say that you possess the enlightened sword heart? Where's that mysterious dark beast from before? Weren't you very formidable? What? Now that you can't defeat them, you want to seek help from us? Haha. So this is how useless the future Sword Emperor is." The profounders in the crowd on the city wall spoke successively, and every single one of them started mock Xianxia, who stood below the city walls. Actually, they weren't stupid, and they naturally knew that Xianxia was right. However, the problem was that they might die if they left the city. On the other hand, no matter how strong Moku and the others were, what could Moku and the others possibly do to them if they didn't leave the city? Most importantly, Moku and the others hadn't harmed their interests right now. "Heh!" Hanyu laughed gloomily for a while before he said, "Humans? Haha." Xianxia gazed at the crowd on the city wall for a short while, and then he shook his head and laughed. He laughed for a moment before he waved his right hand, and then the lightning eagle appeared. Xianxia leaped up onto its back, and then he gestured at Xianxia, who was momentarily stunned by this scene. Xianxia understood Xianxia's intentions, and he leaped up onto the lightning eagle. After that, Xianxia tapped the lightning eagle lightly with his right foot, and it instantly understood him. It immediately transformed into a black shadow that shot into the sky and flashed swiftly towards the distance. Moku and Yu's expressions changed when they witnessed this scene. Obviously, they hadn't expected that Xianxia could actually summon a flying dark beast. Even though they could fly as well, they were unable to maintain their flight for a long time like spirit realm experts could. At this moment, the two of them gazed at Yinglong because only the Green Dragon clan's Yinglong could stop Xianxia. Yinglong nodded when he saw Moku and Yu gaze at him, and then a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of his mouth while he gazed at the lightning eagle. He said, "You trash dark beast. You actually dare to act arrogantly in front of me?" As soon as he finished speaking, a strand of dragon pressure suddenly erupted from Inglong, and it instantly enveloped the lightning eagle. The lightning eagle instantly let out a shrill and miserable cry, and then its figure started to tremble violently. Right when it seemed like it would fall from the sky, a strand of violet light flashed, and then the violet mink appeared in front of Yang Yi. It gazed at the lightning eagle that was trembling violently, and then it waved its little claw, causing an enormous violet arc of light to instantly envelop the lightning eagle. The lightning eagle instantly recovered a great deal when it was enveloped by the violet light. Even though it still couldn't help but tremble slightly, it could fly steadily. This allowed both Yang Yi and Xianxia, who stood on the lightning eagle, to heave sighs of relief. Inglong's expression changed when he witnessed this scene, and then his figure flashed. He returned to his original form, and then he transformed into a green shadow that shot explosively towards the lightning eagle. However, right at this moment, a strand of violet light suddenly and mysterious blasted onto his head, causing Inglong's body to crash swiftly to the ground. This wasn't even the end of it. Around 10 strands of violet light suddenly appeared behind Inglong, and they collided with him. Bang! 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 Inglong didn't even have the chance to react before he was blasted by the violet light, and he crashed to the ground. Inglong's figure shook as he took human form once more, and his expression was unprecedentedly solemn as he gazed at the lightning eagle that had transformed into a black dot in the distance. It wasn't just Inglong. Even the expressions of Mo and Han Yu had become extremely solemn. After a short while, Mo exclaimed abruptly, "A spatial mink." "Indeed," said Han Yu. The two of them exchanged glances, and then they gazed at Inglong. They hoped to obtain an even more accurate answer from him. Inglong took a deep breath, and then he turned around and said to a young man from the Azure Dragon clan, "Quickly return to the demon territory, and then head to the Unreal Dimension. Tell them their young princess has appeared." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and gazed at Han Yu and Mo before he said, "Allow me to give you a word of advice. Both of you better not touch a single hair on that violet mink. Otherwise, both of you're dead, even if your devil exalt and nether god are alive." Mo and Han Yu didn't retort or get angry when they heard this, and they nodded with solemn expressions instead. It could be said that not a single force on Profounder Continent dared to offend that clan on their own. After a short while, Mo and the others withdrew their gazes, fell silent for a moment, and then walked into Ancient Domain City, the demon territory. There was a mysterious barrier in the space above the extreme north of the demon territory. The space around the barrier was layered and warped, so nothing could come close to the surroundings of the barrier. Moreover, merely approaching it would cause one to be minced into pieces and transform into nothingness. This barrier led to a single place, and it was the Unreal Dimension. The Unreal Dimension was an existence that stood aloof in the demon territory because the Spatial Mink clan resided here. The Spatial Mink clan didn't participate in the affairs of the world and was merely fond of exploring the secrets of space. They were capable of all sorts of spatial techniques, and these techniques were mysterious and formidable. It could be said that any clan, including the ancient divine beasts like the Divine Gold Dragon clan, the Skyhowl Qilin clan, the Heavenly Phoenix clan, and even various overlord-level clans of the demon territory, were unwilling to offend the Spatial Mink clan. Why? Because if one were to offend this clan, then they could only receive beatings passively forever. After all, the Spatial Mink clan could travel through space at will. Moreover, their spatial techniques were extremely terrifying as well. In short, in the demon territory, no, it should be said that there wasn't a single power throughout Profounder Continent that dared to rashly offend them. Or perhaps it could be said that the others would thank the gods and would be extremely grateful so long as the Spatial Mink clan didn't offend them. At this moment, in an extremely luxurious hall within the Unreal Dimension, a middle-aged man and a beautiful middle-aged woman were sitting face to face. The woman was extremely beautiful, but there was faint worry on her face, and it caused her peerless beauty to diminish slightly. The middle-aged man sighed lightly and said, "Chingru, don't worry. I've already asked Xiao Tianji to make a prediction. Not only will Zir be fine, she'll even obtain extraordinary fortune. You should be clearly aware of Xiao Tianji's ability. Since he said that, then Zir will definitely be fine. The beautiful woman shook her head lightly and said, even though it's like that, I'm still worried. You know Zir's character well. She's playful and willful. It's fine in the demon territory because those fellows would more or less give us some face. But if she has gone to the human world, then with the greed of the humans. I truly don't dare to continue on this train of thought. Humph! The middle-aged man grunted coldly, and then he said with a fierce tone, if the humans dare to harm even a hair on my Zir, then I'll slaughter the entire human race, even if I have to suffer the wrath of the heavens. Right at this moment, a wave of spatial fluctuation arose in the hall, and then a young man appeared here. The young man bowed to the middle-aged man before he said excitedly, Mink Emperor, the princess has shown herself. What? The middle-aged man and beautiful woman instantly stood up when they heard this. On the back of the lightning eagle, Xianxia squatted down to touch the lightning eagle's feathers, and then he exclaimed with admiration, a flying dark beast at the peak of the king rank. TSK, TSK. I never imagined that I, Xianxia, would actually be able to ride on the back of a peak king rank dark beast one day. Ha. Meanwhile, Yang Yi said, thank you for before. Yang Yi was sincerely grateful to this young man. Even though he would have still been fine if the young man hadn't lent him a hand, he really appreciated it. Xianxia waved his hand and said, you don't have to thank me. I didn't act because I wanted to help you. I merely couldn't bear the sight of Moku and those other fellows acting arrogantly. When he spoke up to hear, Xianxia sized Yang Yi up from top to bottom, and then he said, according to rumor, you've attained the enlightened sword heart. Is it true? Yang Yi smiled, and then he nodded. Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly before he suddenly slashed at Yang Yi with his sword. A strand of sword chi shot violently towards Yang Yi. Yang Yi wasn't surprised by this, and he only drew his sword and stabbed lightly at a certain point on that strand of sword chi after it had arrived in front of him. In an instant, the strand of sword chi was like a balloon that had been stabbed by a pin, and it exploded with a loud bang. You believe me now? Said Yang Yi as he sheathed his sword. Xianxia's expression turned solemn, and then he took a deep glance at Yang Yi before he said, you've actually really attained the enlightened sword heart. The enlightened sword heart. Moreover, you even possess 5th-level sword intent. How could a monstrous genius like you appear in the Southern Territory? This is unusual. Yang Yi shook his head and said, just that is already unusual? Didn't the Sword Sect's founding ancestor come from the Southern Territory all those years ago? Moreover, don't look down on the Southern Territory. There are all sorts of experts hidden there. Don't tell me that you're a disciple of the Sword Sect. Xianxia said, if it's true, then isn't the Sword Sect a little too lucky? Yang Yi shrugged and stated, I'm just an independent cultivator. Xianxia instantly opened his eyes wide with disbelief, and he said, you said you're an independent cultivator? Yang Yi nodded. You're really an independent cultivator? Yang Yi nodded once more. You're sure that you're an independent cultivator? And you don't belong to any sect? The corners of Yang Ye's mouth twitched, and he felt the impulse to draw his sword and cut Xianxia. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly shouted, put me down. Yang Yi was stunned, and then he said, why? Cut the crap. Hurry up. Xianxia had become slightly agitated. Yang Yi nodded when he noticed that Xianxia seemed to have something urgent to attend to. After that, he commanded the lightning eagle to descend to the ground. After they descended to the ground, Xianxia flipped his wrist, and then a talisman appeared in his hand. He didn't hesitate to toss it into the sky. The talisman expanded in the air, and then a wave of violent spatial fluctuations arose around the talisman. After that, traces of pitch-black rifts had gradually stretched out from the talisman. As he watched this scene, Yang Yi asked with an astounded expression, what are you doing? Xianxia grinned. Right when he was about to say something, a furious shout suddenly resounded from within the pitch-black rift. Stinking kid! Have you caused some sort of trouble that you're unable to deal with again? You actually utilized a teleportation talisman. Don't you know that they're very expensive? As soon as these words finished resounding, an old man who carried a silver sword chest on his back flashed out from within the pitch-black rift. When he saw the old man, Xianxia seemed as if he hadn't noticed the furious expression on the old man's face. He walked over to the old man, and then he pointed at Yang Yi and said excitedly, "Madman Huang, quickly take a look at him." The old man glanced at Yang Yi before he withdrew his gaze, and then he suddenly slapped Xianxia on the head and said angrily, "You're actually unable to deal with a fellow at the 5th rank of the King Realm? Moreover, you were even forced to utilize a transportation formation? How could you be so useless? Don't tell anyone you're a disciple of the Divine Sword Sect from now on." Xianxia rolled his eyes and said, "Madman Huang, look again. Carefully. Look my ass. Isn't he just a profounder at the 5th rank of the King Realm?" The old man slapped Xianxia on the head once more. However, he'd still shot his gaze towards Yang Yi. This time, the old man's gaze was frozen. The old man's eyes narrowed as he spoke in a low voice. A deep aura, the glow of the sword hidden in the depths of the gaze. A sword that held at a low angle. "Kid, you've actually attained the advanced stage of sword intent." Yang Ye's heart shook. This old man's strength is really terrifying. He was actually able to discern that I've comprehended 6th level sword intent with a single glance. Such strength. The advanced stage of sword intent? Xianxia was stunned, and then he said, "Madman Huang, are you mistaken? He's clearly at the 5th level of sword intent. Why is it suddenly the 6th level now? Are you an idiot?" Madman Huang glared at Xianxia, and then he gazed at Yang Yi and said, "Kid, you've attained the 6th level of the sword intent at such a young age. You really aren't simple. Come, tell me which sect you're from, and allow me to see exactly which sect was actually capable of fostering such a genius in the sword Dao that even this idiot from my divine sword sect can't compare to you." Xianxia's face darkened, and he said, "He doesn't belong to a sect. He's an independent cultivator. I brought you over here so that you can recruit this monstrous genius before the other sects seize him." "What?" Madman Huang was stunned, and then he said with an excited tone, "He doesn't belong to a sect? An independent cultivator? Kid, is what this idiot said the truth?" Yang Yi was speechless. "Kid, do you really not belong to any sect?" asked Madman Huang once more. Yang Yi had no choice but to nod. When he saw Yang Yi nod, Madman Huang's figure instantly vanished on the spot and appeared in front of Yang Yi. After that, he grabbed both of Yang Yi's shoulder and said in an excited tone, "Kid, join my Divine Sword Sect. My Divine Sword Sect is an 8th rank sect. So long as you join it, then cultivation techniques, combat techniques, dark treasures, women. I'll give you anything you want. All right?" Yang Yi was speechless again. Meanwhile, Xianxia reminded, "Madman Huang, you'll scare him if you act like that." Madman Huang seemed to realize that he was too excited when he heard Xianxia. He immediately smiled with an embarrassed expression, and then he let go of Yang Ye's shoulders and coughed lightly 2 times. Kid, heaven rank cultivation techniques, heaven rank treasures, and peerless beauties. You can choose as you please. What do you think? Come, join my Divine Sword Sect and all of them will be yours." Madman Huang. He seems to have got himself in some trouble. Meanwhile, Xianxia warned. He seemed to be. Xianxia hadn't finished speaking when Madman Huang waved his hand and interrupted Xianxia. He said with heroic spirit, "Trouble? When have I, Madman Huang, been afraid of trouble? Kid, so long as you're willing to join my Divine Sword Sect, then I'll protect you even if you abduct the daughters of the sect masters of those 3 9th rank sects." Xianxia intended to warn Madman Huang again and state, "No, he seems to have offended the spatial." However, Madman Huang glared fiercely at Xianxia, and then he said, "Stinking kid, didn't I say it already? No matter what trouble he's in, I'll deal with it for him. What? You don't believe in my strength? Or is your skin itchy and you need some help from me?" Xianxia's expression instantly became unsightly, and then he took a deep breath and decisively chose to shut his mouth. Right at this moment, a strand of violet light flashed, and then the violet mink who Yang Yi had hidden in the tiny vortex had appeared on his shoulder. After it appeared, it took a light breath of the clear and fresh air, and then it glared at Yang Yi with displeasure. It seemed to be displeased with Yang Yi for disallowing it to come out and play. Yang Yi smiled helplessly, and then he stretched out his hand and held the violet mink in his arms before he rubbed its head lightly. He naturally hadn't made the little fellow enter the tiny vortex earlier because he was afraid that the little fellow would cause trouble for him. He was afraid that the little fellow's injuries weren't healed. However, now it would seem like the little fellow was fine. Yang Yi hadn't noticed that Madman Huang seemed as if his acupoints had been pressed at the instant that the little fellow appeared here, and he was directly stunned on the spot. His eyes were opened wide while he gazed with disbelief at the violet mink that appeared on Yang Ye's shoulder. When he saw Madman Huang's appearance, Xianxia instantly took pleasure in Madman Huang's misfortune and started smiling. He said in his heart, "You'll deal with any trouble? This trouble is probably not so easily dealt with. Let's see how you deal with it." After a short while, Madman Huang was just about to say something. Right at this moment, his expression suddenly changed, and he shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" Right when Yang Yi and Xianxia were puzzled, a wave of fluctuation arose in the space 10 m in front of them. In an instant, a middle-aged man and a beautiful middle-aged woman appeared mysteriously on the spot. Madman Huang's expression instantly turned solemn when he saw them, and he exclaimed in a low voice, "The Mink Emperor, the Demon Empress." The middle-aged man and woman didn't even spare a glance at Madman Huang, and their gazes stared fixedly at the violet mink that was now on Yang Ye's shoulder again. The two of them seemed to be extremely excited, especially the beautiful middle-aged woman. There were even tears glimmering in her eyes. The violet mink blinked, and then its figure flashed and instantly appeared in front of the beautiful middle-aged woman. After that, it embraced the woman's neck with its little claws before ceaselessly rubbing its little head against the woman's face. Yang Yi smiled lightly when he saw this scene. If he wasn't wrong, then this middle-aged man and beautiful middle-aged woman were the little fellow's loved ones. Even though he didn't know how they'd found the little fellow, it wasn't important anymore. The most important thing was that the little fellow could finally return home. He naturally didn't want the little fellow to leave him. However, he didn't have the right to make the little fellow follow him forever. After all, the little fellow had its own loved ones and home. Of course, if the little fellow was willing to continue staying by his side, then it couldn't be any better. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man suddenly gazed at Yang Yi, and the gentle expression in his eyes had instantly turned icy cold when he looked at Yang Yi. Moreover, it wasn't just icy cold. It even carried ghastly killing intent that was completely undisguised. He said, "Human, why was Zir with you?" As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, Yang Yi, Xianxia, and Madman Huang instantly felt the space here fluctuate violently, as if it was on the verge of shattering into pieces. He naturally didn't have a good impression of humans. Humans had always been extremely greedy and selfish. So, when he saw Yang Yi together with the violet mink, and when he saw the violet mink being so close to Yang Yi, his first thought was that his daughter had been tricked by this human's sweet words and promises. So the little fellow's name is Zir? It sounds like the name of a girl. Yang Yi grinned, and then he described how he'd met the little fellow that day. Meanwhile, the violet mink hurriedly waves its little claws as well. It waved them for a while before it seemed to have recalled that it didn't have to use its claws to convey its thoughts to the middle-aged man and beautiful middle-aged woman. So, strands of ripples emerged from its mouth. After a short while, the violet mink finished speaking, and then it flashed onto Yang Ye's shoulder. It pointed at Yang Yi, and then pointed at the middle-aged man and woman as if it was introducing them. The two of them exchanged glances, and then they frowned at the same time. The beautiful woman said, "Zir, you're saying that the two of you are friends? Very good friends? Just like me and your imperial father." The violet mink grinned from ear to ear, and then it hurriedly nodded. The two of them exchanged glances once more. This time their faces fell, because they seemed to have understood something. The beautiful woman's gaze descended onto Xianxia, and she sized him up before she gazed at the violet mink and said, "Zier, he isn't worthy of you. Moreover, humans are mostly treacherous and deceitful. They are not worthy of being trusted." The corners of Xianxia, Xianxia, and Madman Huang's mouths had twitched. Does she have to be so frank? At any rate, there are 3 humans here. The violet mink blinked, and then it shook its head. It pointed its claw at Xianxia and then pointed at itself as if it was expressing something. The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "Zier, he's a human while you're a demon beast. Even though you're about to take human form, you're still a demon beast in the end. Moreover, he's truly too weak. He's utterly unworthy of you. Let's go home. We've already caused great chaos in the demon territory in order to find you, and it's time to put everything back in order." The violet mink was slightly anxious. Right when it was about to say something else, Xianxia strode forward and bowed to the middle-aged man and woman. He said, "I think seniors might have misunderstood. The little fellow and I are friends, or it wouldn't be going too far to say we're dear to each other. That's all. Friends? Dear to each other." The middle-aged man laughed coldly and said, "Human, what qualifications do you possess to say that? Do you know of Zier's identity? Do you know of her potential? Do you know what she will inherit in the future? Out of consideration for the fact that you've helped Zier in the past, I won't kill you. However, in the future, No, there will be no such thing. Both of you'll have no chance to see each other again." Xianxia looked the middle-aged man in the eye and said, "I don't have the qualifications now, but it doesn't mean that I won't in the future." Madman Huang instantly gasped when he witnessed this scene. My God, this little bastard actually dares to speak to the Mink Emperor in that way. Is he fearless because he's ignorant, or is he audacious to the extreme? Oh! The Mink Emperor's eyes narrowed as he said, "Human, do you know who you're talking to?" Xianxia grinned and said, "Senior, you said that I don't possess the qualifications to be friends with the little fellow. Then allow me to ask you, what conditions do I have to meet? Is this enough?" As soon as Xianxia finished speaking, he took a step forward, and then his 6th-level sword intent surged out without restraint. 6th-level sword intent. A wisp of surprise flashed in their eyes. Obviously, the middle-aged man and woman hadn't expected that Xianxia had actually attained 6th-level sword intent. Even though 6th-level sword intent was nothing to the two of them, it was different when it was possessed by a human that wasn't even 20 years of age. If that isn't enough. Right at this moment, Xianxia took another step forward, and then he said, "What about now?" As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia closed his eyes slightly and entered an empty state. After that, the sword in his hand trembled violently before a sword howl shot into the sky. The enlightened sword heart. The expressions of the middle-aged man and beautiful middle-aged woman had finally changed when they witnessed this scene, and they revealed a solemn expression for the first time. In their opinion, even though one could be considered a genius by comprehending 6th-level sword intent before the age of 20, it wasn't sufficient for them to take a person seriously. However, the enlightened sword heart was completely different. He attained both 6th-level sword intent and the enlightened sword heart before the age of 20. 10,000 years ago, wasn't that human expert from the sword sect around the same? Madman Huang was utterly stunned instead. 6th-level sword intent and the enlightened sword heart? My God, what sort of monstrous genius have I encountered? He's actually such a monstrous genius. The Divine Sword Sect was said to be the leading sect in the Sword Dao throughout the continent. But at this moment, Madman Huang felt that the geniuses of the Divine Sword Sect's younger generation were trash when compared to this monstrous genius who stood before him. The Mink Emperor gazed at Xianxia as he spoke in a low voice. The Quasi-Sword Emperor. The beautiful middle-aged woman nodded and said, "Your potential and natural talent are shocking indeed, especially your natural talent in the Sword Dao, and it's the most monstrous amongst all the experts we've seen. But so what? Monstrous geniuses that haven't matured can only be considered as monstrous geniuses. But they aren't experts. Once they die, then the potential of monstrous geniuses would be meaningless. So, your potential and natural talent are meaningless to the two of us. We only look at the present and not the future because there are too many variables in the future. Understand? Xianxia shook his head and he said, I merely wanted to prove that I have the qualifications to be friends with the little fellow. That's all. As for what Senior said about disregarding the future, I wonder if Senior has heard a saying, life is full of variables, so don't bully the young for being weak. The beautiful woman gazed at Xianxia and said, You're that confident? Yes. Xianxia didn't back down and met her gaze. Very good. She nodded and said, Take the first during the Hidden Dragon rankings this year. What do you think? Unexpectedly, Xianxia shook his head and said, Senior, you've still mistaken my intention. The little fellow and I are friends. We're dear to each other. This is something that doesn't need to be proved by anything. I didn't prove myself to the two of you for the sake of currying favor with you or to obtain your acknowledgement. Then why? Asked the beautiful woman. Xianxia shook his head, and then he gazed at the violet mink and said, Little fellow, it's time for us to part. Promise me that you won't be playful in the future and will cultivate properly. I'll do the same as well. Let's prove to the world and your loved ones that I'm the human that's the most qualified in the world to be your friend. And you're the demon beast who's most qualified to be my friend as well. All right?